You're back to Spotlight on the Brumbies of Kosciuszko National Park. We're going to talk a bit more now about the sadder side of the Brumbies. We've talked about the beautiful ideology and them roaming free and being part of Australian history and culture, going to war, supporting our soldiers, all those things. So let's talk a little bit now about what's happening today to the Brumbies in Kosciuszko National Park.
Yeah, so there's a big problem over how many Brumbies are actually in the park. We can't agree, and when we say we, it's different community groups, the horse supporters, the people that want the horses gone, and the government, whether it's the former Liberal National Government or the current Labor government. So that's the first issue, which there are now community-led efforts to address that. That drives a government agenda or a national parks management agenda. And in around about 2018, legislation was adopted by the New South Wales Parliament, the Wild Horse Heritage Management Bill, and that set a number of 3,000 horses that could remain in certain areas of the park. And anybody that believes that there are more than that either want to shoot them or remove them. And removing them is by trapping. So you build steel yards and you try to lure the horses in to those steel yards. And remembering that there are no fences in Kosci, so steel is kind of a foreign thing to them. And a fence in a yard is also a foreign thing. So you've got to lure them in. And Julie's seen some of these traps, and you explain how they lure them in.
They lure them in through salt licks and molasses and loosen, basically. And when they all come in, the traps become quite full.
So what they do is they use cattle yard panels, like a mobile cattle yards, and they set them up. There's two of them side by side, and there's a little feed out ramp, and the doors are locked open at the front, and the horses can come and go, and they can lick these big salt blocks, and it's a mineral lick. They love it. And then there's the rich molasses, which is like a sweet treat, in little cutout notches in a log that sits in the back of the trap. And then there's fresh lucerne. Now lucerne, it's one of those fantastic smells. When you smell cut lucerne, you love it. And the horses love it. So you're giving them something that they're not going to get.
Horse lollies.
Basically, ice creams, lollies. And then what happens is the horses get used to walking in and out of these foreign, strange things. And then the parks workers got secret cameras in the trees that they're watching, and they can see that there's quite a good number of horses using these things. They'll spring the trap, and then once a bunch of horses come in, and they might push the bigger ones or push the little ones in, and then suddenly they trigger something and the doors lock shut. And then the real tragedy starts because they're then trapped. They can't jump out. They can't get through. They injure themselves trying to bust it down.
Yeah, and they injure the other ones as well.
Yeah, so they can trample them. The little ones, quite often foals will come in if they're at hoof with the mother. Or the foal will wait outside and the mother might go in, and then they're separated and it can't get milk. Or the foal's in and the mother's gone out and the mother can't get back in. So what you see around these traps is dirt, just paddled. It's like 1 million horses have walked in a circle around the trap. And what it is the horses will be there for days and days, walking around and around and around, talking to each other, the ones trapped inside and the ones trapped outside. Then the human being turns up, forces the horses out of the trap into a trailer, and they take them away in horse trailers, which are noisy and clangy, and the roads are quite rough. The horses are taken down to Blowering quite often, which is a rangers station on the edge of the park. Now, some lightness to this is that there is an opportunity for people to rehome these trapped horses, and that's quite an involved thing where you commit to taking the horse, you have to collect it, and then you've got to feed it and get it used to people, because this is a horse from a wild area. It's had no interaction. personally, my wife and I and our kids, we adopted 6 male Brumbies just before Christmas, and that's a positive story because it's worked out quite well for us.
Sure did. You only had them not very long, and you can walk up to them already. You can even pat them.
Yeah.
Kids can pat them.
My kids could pat them very quickly.
Yeah.
We had a secret weapon. We've got a friend of ours who's spent her life with horses, and she used her domestic horses, which were really big, and she used those domestic horses to try to teach these other horses and keep them in line. Again, using that kind of herd theory where there's a dominant horse, there's a second dominant horse, and then there's the juniors or the runts of the pack or the bachelor herd. So having a friend come in with that knowledge, accelerated things. But it's proof, testament that these are not wild animals. These are not noxious pests or ferals. They calm down very quickly. And I've got twin 6-year-olds. They were patting them within a week. That's not bad. So people who think that this horse up in the park is a problem, well, again, that's a poor image. It's not the right image.
Yeah. So, as you know, Andrew, we're in early stages of talking with you about potentially rehoming some Brumbies ourselves. Me and Dinah. Dinah's in the studio here as well. She does the show before me. So what's involved? If people want to get involved, if they want to start taking on and rehoming, rescuing some of these Brumbies and preserving some of the, that culture of modern Australia, what's involved in that? What sort of setup do people need? How much space?
Well, there's a higher step than that. You're not just preserving culture. You're not preserving an idea. You're preserving a sentient being. You're adopting a real life living sentient being that will love you back like a dog. So we all know how dogs look to their owner as if their owner is the only thing in their world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually how it works. So you've got to be prepared to commit to your horse or your horses.
Yeah.
And there are people out there that will help. So there is, they're called rehomers. And so these are the people that have an approval with the national parks to take delivery of the horses that are trapped. They would quite often take them back to their farm, and you need to put them in the yards, and you need to do some basic things. So if you take any male horses, they've got to be gelded, which is cutting the nuts off, which is a bit sad as a man. It's kind of like, that's a bit harsh. But that's part of trying to reduce their hormones that flush through them at different times in their life, and then they can do some stupid things like running through fences or getting tangled in a fence, or even impaling themselves on sticks because they get a fright or what have you. It's a practical response.
Yeah.
And the mares, you can get potluck sometimes. You can actually rehome a pregnant mare, and you get a little surprise a little time later. But you need grass, and you need fences, and you need to understand that you will have to buy lucerne, particularly to then create that bond with the horse by having handfuls of lucerne to get them to come to you. Yeah.
I've actually got a paint that eats a lot. I'm finding I'm going through nearly 2 bales a week just on him. So, I mean, it depends on the horse, but some of the Brumbies are only small, and a lot of them are different sizes depending on what's in the breed of them. And that can be, up to 4 or 5 different breeds.
Oh, there's quite a lot. Yeah. And another thing is you don't have to put horseshoes on these things, right? These things live in the wild without horseshoes. They take care of their own hoofs, and that's something that a lot of people don't really contemplate. You don't need to put horseshoes on them. You don't need to spend vast sums of money on them. You don't have to go out and buy a saddle, for example. You don't have to wear jodhpurs, right? And having grown up in a bit of a horse-based community, and I want to put that message out there. You don't have to wear horse clothes if you have a horse.
What if you like jodhpurs?
Well, fill your boots, mate. Fill your boots. But they need grass, and you need to be able to move them, so a bit of sequence grazing. They can't just stay in the same paddock or it'll go to dirt very quickly. So, right. But you just reach out into the community. There's plenty of Facebook groups. there's wonderful people. Gabby from Mountain Brumby Sanctuary helped us with ours, and you just won't meet a more passionate woman. So that is well taken care of amongst the community.
Yeah, shout out to Gabby.
And these people will do all the bits and pieces with the liaison with the park, and then horses turn up, and then you can connect up with the wide sort of range of groups across Facebook particularly. And it also wouldn't hurt to go and visit someone that's got some.
That's right.
Just so you can understand a bit more about what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, awesome. I have a girlfriend that's got 4 Brumbies. She got 2 of them last year and again another 2 this year. Came from the traps, very, very thin. Bought them down here, got them into her property, and we've now fattened them up quite well, and they instantly blended with the 2 other Brumbies that she's had for over a year. The connection was unbelievable. They all went down into the paddock, they all joined together, they ran around together, and just to see that's an interaction like horses that didn't even know each other from different mobs.
How beautiful is that?
Yeah. So that's lightening the mood there. It was a bit sad with the trapping. The point also is that if we don't rehome them, they go to knackeries and they get turned into pet food.
And that's where you don't want that to happen. I really hate that.
That's where our boys were headed, because most people don't want the boy horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we took the 6 boys, and that's where they were going otherwise, which, again, look at a horse in an eye. Look in the horse's eye. So that's where we can turn the tables. And now let's come back a step and say, well, if there aren't the big number of horses in the park and the legislation says that there can be 3,000, why are we trapping them? And then worse still, why did the government get up in a helicopter and shoot them? And that's a really sobering, it makes you stop and think, who would do that? And I think we need another song before we get into that. That's a heavy conversation.
Yeah. You're listening to Spotlight on the Brumbies of Kosciuszko National Park. I'm your host, Dean Carlton, and in the studio with me I've got Andrew Thaler and Julie Caterino. Let's get back to the man from the Snowy River and the fate of the Brumbies.